the interim chief of police issued to the media and the general public a statement that grossly mischaracterizes the intent and effect of this proposed amendment.
Well, that's Seattle City Council President Lorena Gonzalez trying to set things straight on what has been a confusing and bruising back and forth over the budget for the Seattle Police Department. So what's she talking about? Why is Interim Chief Diaz so upset? And what's with all the memos flying around City Hall? Well, we are going to answer those questions and plenty more here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. Brian Callanan with you. I am a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. And joining me once again is Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight, who's been taking in so much spin on the city budget over the past few weeks, he has to take a daily dose of Dramamine. Kevin, how you doing, bud?
Getting a little dizzy out there from all this spin, but you know.
It happens. We're going to work our way through it. Thanks. Great to see you as always, Kevin. And thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They are your favorite coffee spot on the first floor of City Hall. Please do support them. Other small businesses too. Small Business Saturday coming right up. Thanks to owners John and Riley from City Grind for their support. Thanks also to our patrons. I know a lot of you are listening. We're hoping some of you can support the show too if you are able. Jump in at the coveted $10 level on Patreon, and we will send you a Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. There they are right there. Our mugshot of the week from Ellen. She actually did let her mug fill up with rainwater over the past week. That thing is darn near full, and I'm glad it didn't get blown over. So hang in there, everybody. We're going to get through monsoon season before you know it. And also, everybody, please do become a patron of the show at any level you can. We would really appreciate the support. Special thanks to Converge Media, the video version of our podcast, featured on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, off we go with right here, right now. Well, Kevin, we are recording the show at a critical juncture just before the council approves the 2022 budget. So I want to try to set the stage here. Dozens of memos have been flying around here across the interwebs between the council, the federal police monitor, the city budget director, interim police chief Adrian Diaz, too. Before we talk about the actual amendments, can we go through this, the police monitor's concerns, maybe make our way to the budget director and the police chief, too? Help us break this down, please.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, the city council, when they went through their whole list of 190 amendments, they had several that cut, altogether somewhere between $10 and $11 million from SPD's budget.
Yes.
And the police monitor and Judge Robart, who oversees the consent decree, have said in the past some remarks that one could consider to be critical of budget cuts to SPD.
Right.
So, of course, the city council decided, well, we'd better go, at the very least, go brief the police monitor on this. So they sent one of their staff over to brief the police monitor.
Yep.
And, at the end of that meeting, he said, well, I can't give you some feedback right on the spot, but I'll send you some feedback. So a week later, he sent a memo.
Yeah.
And in particular, he called out some cuts to some technology projects that SPD had planned to fund.
Yeah.
And said these are really essential for data gathering, for ongoing analysis and evaluation of how the city is complying with the consent decree. So, don't cut those.
Right.
And he didn't really comment on any of the other ones.
Right.
It turns out, though, that when they got around to sort of putting together the chair's balancing package, those amendments that they briefed the city, the police monitor on, had changed a fair amount between that.
Right.
And so, a couple of things happened from there. One, the city council, in particular, Budget Chair Mosqueda, sort of made some representations about what they'd done to brief the police monitor, which turned out to be not entirely the whole story.
Okay. Right.
And so the police monitor got a little upset about the fact that, hey, you didn't brief me on all this, and it's not like I said okay to everything else. So
right.
Let's not overextend what I actually said and did.
Sure.
And Mosqueda pushed back with memos of her own about, hey, here's the whole timeline of what we did, and for briefing the police monitor and all this. In the meantime, SPD Chief Diaz sent his own angry memo off to the city council, complaining about the potential cuts. And of course, Mosqueda sent a memo back for that.
Yeah.
And even more recently, just in general, city budget director, Ben Noble, wrote his own memo, not specifically calling out the SPD cuts, but in general pointing out that, the long-term financial stability and sustainability of the city budget, there's some concerns there. There are some concerns even before COVID happened. Right. But particularly since COVID happened, there are concerns. And so he sent a memo off with some of his concerns about this. Sure. And the city council sent a memo back. And both of those members said, we're not trying to point fingers at both of them, quite honestly. Right. Pointing fingers. Right. So, lots of memos going back and forth about this stuff. It's been quite the mess. And then, where it ended up at the end of last week when the city council actually sat down to vote on these amendments. Right.
This Chief Diaz part is big. Yeah.
Is the Chief Diaz basically sent out a press release calling out one particular amendment and really misrepresenting what it was about.
Yeah, let's break this down, this whole concept of position authority. You had a great piece on this in SEC.
All right.
Tonight.
Yeah, I wrote a long piece on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way large organizations do their budgeting for headcount and payroll is if you want to hire somebody, you get two numbers, right? You get a position authority, which allows you to hire somebody. And that's a recognition of the fact that if you hire somebody this year, you're still going to be paying them next year. So you're not only sort of accruing a financial burden for this year, but for future years as well. So we better do some planning around that. And then you also get the money to pay the person this year.
Right.
And, in a nice, stable, fully hired organization, those are the same, those are nicely aligned, but they can get out of alignment in an organization that's growing or an organization that's shrinking.
Yes.
And what's happened with SPD over the last couple of years is because it's had so much attrition.
It's shrinking.
Its position authority, about 1,350, is well above the number of people that it actually has.
Right.
But because of this weird part of how city budgeting kind of works by default, the starting place for SPD's payroll budget every year is the position authority, not the actual number of employees that they have. Right.
And Council President Gonzalez was trying to rectify that, I guess, in some ways, in terms of that position authority.
Because what happened this year with this is SPD ended up with $19 million of salary savings at the beginning of the year. Now, salary savings at the end of the year, you can expect that, right? Maybe hiring went slower or there was more attrition, so you just didn't spend all your payroll, right? I get that. But you're not supposed to have $19 million of salary savings at the beginning of the year. Right.
This is
something's gone wrong in your budget process. So
Councilmember Mosqueda has been saying, we don't want to leave money laying around, especially in the time of COVID.
So, and of course, basically what this turned in for Mayor Durkin was a slush fund, right? She took that $19 million and proposed how to spend $17.9 million of it on other things.
Yes.
And City Council, whoa. You don't just get that money as part of SPD and then decide what you want to do with it, right? That's part of the budgeting process. But it's really easy to kind of construct the mayor's proposed budget in ways that make it really hard to unwind these things for the City Council. Right. And the City Council would rather have an upfront conversation about, hey, new spending on things than just have $17.9 million in slush fund and SPD that they decide, and then the council has to try to figure, do the detective work, figure out where did all that money go, and then maybe call some of it back if they disagree with some of the spending. Right. So all that is, precursor to Council President Gonzalez putting out a proposal that says, okay,
this amendment,
since their actual number of employees is only about 1,220, and their possession authority is 1,350, about 134 difference between those two. And even if you ask SPD, they say it would, take, out to 2024 at the earliest before they could even get up to like 1,250. Let's get 101. Let's take that position authority down from 1,350 down to 1,256. Right. That's what still a good 35 above where they are right now. So if they magically get a bunch of people from Bellevue Police Department show up saying, hey, we want to come work for you,
they would have the money for that.
They could actually go higher. Even if it's above and beyond what they have in their staffing plan for next year. Right. So it's no real constraint for this year or even really for next year. Right. It takes it down to 1,250 where they think they might be in 2024. Right. But this got spun by Chief Diaz is they're trying to cut 100 SPD officers. They weren't. And that was just complete nonsense. It was wrong. Quite frankly, Chief Diaz who spun up a lot of misleading press coverage of this based upon that claim.
Right.
He owes Gonzalez an apology because he, and I can't read his mind, so I don't know if that was deliberate or if he also misunderstood, because hey, this budgeting stuff is complicated.
It's confusing.
But but he was wrong.
Yeah. And the upshot of it is the council didn't move on this amendment from Council President Gonzalez. Right. I think because they were scared about this piece.
Yeah, I think they were pretty scared about this and the way the optics would look on this. Right.
Yeah.
So the one, in fact, in general, of all the proposals to sort of restore some of the, their cuts to SPD, only one actually got approved. And that was to add back in the expansion of the community service officer program by 6 employees. All the other ones, it turns out that there was a lot of interest in restoring some of the other ones, but they really got their hands tied around the funding source that they would use to do that. Because they don't have a lot of money. They've used all the money they have lying around. Right?
Absolutely.
So the only thing that was really left was this thing called the Revenue Stabilization Fund, which is a thing that they've depleted significantly over the last 2 years. It's an emergency fund for the city to use when city revenues take a hit, as they have under COVID. Right. So they've depleted significantly. This is the year they were starting to build it back. They've got a city policy that says they were supposed to put in about a certain amount. They're actually the budget right now is putting in about $10 million more than that. So they were having some discussion about, hey, maybe we don't have to put in a full $10 million more.
They're only supposed to put in about $3 million or so. Right. Yeah.
But a number of the city council members also basically took to heart the city budget director's memo saying, hey, look, long-term sustainability of this budget and, even just like revenues or things like the payroll tax in next year are less of a sure thing than we'd really like them to be. And so they said, not feeling good about shortchanging the revenue stabilization fund. We should be putting everything we can in there because we may need it as soon as next year.
Yeah. And just to briefly wrap this up, Kevin, in terms of what happened with the budget overall, it doesn't sound like much beyond this balancing package. A lot of these amendments are going to make it through. And I know we're looking at some moving targets here, but just some final thoughts on that.
Very little change. So, the other one thing they did was they actually sneaked in there a modification to the mayor's emergency executive order from a couple weeks ago that authorized hiring bonuses for SPD officers and for 911 dispatchers, right? And so the modification they're making is they're limiting the total amount that can be spent on that up to $500,000.
Yes.
And they put an expiration date on it. It expires on December 31st, basically Mayor Durkin's last day in office.
Yeah.
So it's going to run through the end of this year, but it won't have any budget implications for next year.
Wow. That's amazing. So I know we're going to keep track of this. And of course, the final vote on Monday, the 23rd, will keep track of the fallout too. Up next, a new vaccination clinic opening in the Rainier Beach area. That's the good news. The bad news, watching those COVID case levels rise again across the nation. We're going to break it down with Now Hear This. So last week, Mayor Jenny Durkin celebrated the opening of a new vaccine clinic in Southeast Seattle at the Senior Center there. She mentioned that in Seattle, 87.2% of our eligible residents are vaccinated. We have the lowest hospitalization and mortality rate of any major city. With that, however, comes a warning.
But we know that as we roll out pediatric vaccinations for children who are 5 to 11 years old and boosters to those who are eligible, particularly our most vulnerable, that we have to again kind of provide more community-based vaccination clinics for our residents.
Kevin, a few parts to this. So the FDA is expected to recommend booster shots for basically anyone that wants them, not limiting these to people who are older or more vulnerable health-wise. So the city is really trying to ramp this up, especially getting more children age 5 to 11 vaccinated too. I've seen this trend in our state that cases have kind of hit this plateau of sorts, but nationwide, cases are up 23% in the past 2 weeks. It just feels like the city felt they had to do something here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's big debates right now about whether herd immunity is even really a thing we can reach, and Delta has really changed their minds on this in a lot of ways, because herd immunity is based upon eliminating pockets of susceptible people.
Yes,
but it's also about basically stopping transmission, right? Having low transmissibility of it. And what Delta has shown us is that even vaccinated people could still catch it and be asymptomatic and even potentially pass it on to other people for a short amount of time in which they're contagious. So the whole idea that we could actually get to herd immunity is now sort of really in question. But at the same time, even if we take approach from this saying, well, this is going to be endemic, this is going to be with us, kind of like influenza is, when we switch over to looking at what's the right way to really manage this as an endemic virus, look at what we do with influenza, right?
Yeah.
We, have regular, essentially booster shots of that. And
every
we
year,
use that to protect the most vulnerable people, as well as in some ways to, reduce transmission.
Sure. I got my shot. Yeah.
I got mine too.
Yeah.
And, and I recommend everybody to go do that.
Sure. Absolutely.
and it, and it helps a lot, right? And, other sort of just public health measures that we do and, personal sanitation measures that we do to reduce transmission, that all, helps a lot. And we're going to end up doing that. But at the same time, vaccines and boosters are going to be really, really important.
Right.
If this is going to be a thing that we're going to live with, we want to get to the point where, nobody gets really seriously ill based on that. There's still deaths from influenza every year, right?
Absolutely.
There's still, even if this becomes endemic and, we get it under control, there are still going to be people who get seriously ill. Hopefully it'll be very, very low. And the vaccines will help us tremendously with doing that.
Yeah. Just because our healthcare system is getting overloaded right now. Keep going. Yeah.
As well as therapeutics and antivirals. We're seeing a whole bunch of those really interesting and apparently pretty effective ones show up on the market. And just, coming back to vaccines for a moment, the flu vaccines, annual flu vaccines are about 50 to 60% effective. We've got COVID vaccines that are, north of 90% effective right now.
That's a big deal.
Right? And at least in preventing severe disease or death.
Yes, which is the most
not
important.
Necessarily preventing infection, but preventing severe disease.
Yeah.
If we had that with flu,
oh goodness,
we'd be in a much better shape of flu every year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign. It's not clear whether we're going to be able to stay at 90% effectiveness for the long term with these. Although, the mRNA vaccines are designed a very different way than how flu vaccines are designed. And there's a lot of people looking at, okay, do we need to use that same approach for flu vaccines right now? So there's a lot of innovation that's come out of COVID over the last 2 years that we're going to see applied to influenza and other, a whole bunch of other viral diseases that will, I think, in a lot of ways change healthcare in the years to come.
I've almost lost count here, but it sounds like we might be coming up on a fifth wave of COVID kind of spreading across the United States. Your thoughts about that, concerns about that? This is such a pandemic that won't go away, I guess.
Yeah, it is endemic, right? It is becoming endemic.
Around so far.
It isn't going, I think we need to assume at this point, it's not going to go away and we're going to have to manage it. The notion like everybody gets vaccinated and it goes away.
Sure.
And, when we reach herd immunity, that does not seem to be what's happening. And more and more healthcare professionals and epidemiologists are sort of getting on the bandwagon of, no, that's not the way this is going to end. Right.
Wow.
So, so will it be a fifth wave? I think we do have the ongoing dangers of like we saw last year with the holiday season.
Sure. Right. Yep.
We do have a lot more people vaccinated, and that will help. We do have better therapeutics. We have rapid testing. Right?
Yeah.
I got a couple, I mail ordered a couple
kits.
of home rapid kits.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one with me in the holidays when I go visit my folks. Right.
You bet.
If something happens, I can test myself really quickly. And that will help too. Right. If people can find out if they're actually infected and isolate themselves really quickly, that will make an enormous difference.
Right. Stay healthy, stay safe, everybody, especially you, Kevin. We need you around, buddy. All right. More election action, I should point out, is coming your way. If you live in District 3, the recall election of Councilmember Shama Sawant, we've been talking about this. Ballots were mailed out last week on November 17th. And I've been looking at this, Kevin. The money keeps rolling in. As of mid-November, $843,000 for the Sawant Solidarity Campaign, the people that want to keep her in office, $741,000 for the recall effort. Both of those numbers jumped up about $40,000 in just about a week's time. I'm just trying to figure out, Kevin, what the next few weeks are going to look like when it comes to campaigning for both sides. Here we go all over again in terms of a lot of election messages heading out there.
Yeah, well, and And the interesting part about this one is it's really just District 3. It's not citywide.
Yeah.
Right? But District 3 is going to look a lot like, the last 2 weeks of October looked like throughout the city, right? There's going to be lawn signs. There's going to be window signs. There's going to be signs posted on telephone poles. There's going to be a lot of flyers in the mail, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people going door to door, knocking on doors, trying to get out the vote. Right.
Yeah.
And and it is concentrated just in this one area of the city, but it is going to be intense up there. I've already heard, from folks I know who live up there that, they can't walk down the street without running into, somebody, a volunteer for one side or the other around us. Right.
Yeah.
No, so, it's going to be intense.
It's going to be intense, and we will see what happens there. If indeed it does happen, the council would have to choose a replacement for, and as I understand it, that person would have to run again next year. Is that right, Kevin? I wanted to make sure I broke that down.
So the council would appoint somebody who would serve until the next general election.
Right.
And that would be next November. Normally, when the city council appoints somebody, they really prefer to appoint somebody who is not going to try to run for office. Caretaker, person.
Right. Yeah.
And because they don't want to be seen as giving somebody an advantage in the election.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you for that, Kevin. I want to break down what's happening with the State Redistricting Commission, a deadline that came and went. We're talking about it coming up on What's Next. Well, we got trouble in redistricting land at the state level for the first time. The State Redistricting Commission, been around for several decades here, has failed to meet its deadline for redrawing new legislative district boundaries. So now this job will end up in the lap of the state Supreme Court. Kevin, what happened here? Some general thoughts about this.
I think we're still sorting out what happened.
Yeah, true.
I've seen, one report from the Washington Observer, which says that essentially, what happened on the ground, was they went to the very last minute. They had a deadline of midnight on a particular night last week where they had to get the four-person commission had to vote on, at least 3 of them to approve a set of districting maps.
Yes. Yeah. 2 Dems, 2 Republicans involved with that. Keep going.
Yeah. And they didn't get it done by midnight. They actually voted something right after midnight.
Right.
But, essentially doesn't count because they were past the deadline.
Right.
And so then under the law, it then goes to the state Supreme Court to decide what the maps will be. And they'll have till March to decide that. So officially, that's the line.
Yeah.
What the Washington Observer said after doing some poking around was that it was a political ploy by the Democrats to basically stall it out because they thought they could get the what everybody believes to be a very left-leaning state Supreme Court to approve better maps than what they could get through this 4-person commission.
Yeah. Now, I will say Senator John Braun, who was a pretty staunch Republican in the state legislature, did come out with a press release soon after this saying, hey, Supreme Court, they did their job. They might have made this decision a few minutes later or whatever else, but please stick by this. And I just wonder what happens next. Does the Supreme Court reopen this? It sounds like they're going to get a case basically from both sides here as to what's happening here from the Democrats, from the Republicans. But it feels like this opens up a Pandora's box again. And I really wonder what's going to happen over the next couple of months because this is uncharted territory for the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah. And it's very political. And this is the last thing the Supreme Court wants to spend time on. They do not want to be doing this. Right? They're not experts in this. They're not districting masters. So they're going to have to, they're going to get a pile of evidence and, lots and lots of amicus briefs and everybody's going to weigh in this. They're going to have to read it all. And then I don't even know, I don't even know what process they would have to follow.
They're going to have to
make up a whole process to decide this, right? Which I guess in some ways is going to be very similar to what the 4-person districting commission had to go through.
Right.
Are they just going to repeat that whole process from the beginning?
Boy,
Are they going to pick up from where the commission left off when they hit this is fairly unprecedented, right? So I don't, the law says it's up to them now, and the legislature, nobody gets to tell them how to do this now.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. The justices will figure it out. Yeah. And they'll have to make a decision by April 30th of next year is the deadline that I've seen out there. So we'll keep track of this one. Well, we need to wrap up the show here. And we always try to do that with a taste of something good to have with your coffee on our Coffee Break podcast. So, Kevin, take a look. Today, it is indeed, I'll bring it right up here, a sugar cookie, and you might be able to see, do you see some of that red and green hint in there?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just wondering, is it too early for Christmas cookies? Do you have to wait until after Thanksgiving? Any thoughts on this? What do you think?
It's never too early for Christmas cookies.
Fire them up in June. Why not?
It's not, as long as your insulin level can handle it. It's never too early for sugar.
That's right. When do you start baking them up? I know that you're a big holiday baker.
I don't do sugar cookies. I don't like just sort of generic sugar cookies.
I know.
I like, I like molasses cookies.
Oh, yeah.
I like, I love chocolate chip cookies and all sorts of variations on chocolate chip cookies.
Yep. It's that time. It's that time of year for sure.
Yeah, but I'm not really just a sort of generic sugar cookie kind of guy.
Okay, I know you have a lot of depth, my friend. So we will plumb those depths in the weeks ahead as we talk about some of the Christmas cookies.
I'm not sure I have that much depth.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure.
Take it easy. All right. Well, thank you, Kevin, as always, for participating in the show. It's always great to have you. Thanks also to our patrons. Thanks everybody who's listening. It is Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you might listen. Again, please do support our show on Patreon. Always appreciate it. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We will see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2021.